I'll tell you what, I've been looking forward to this ever since Monday. This gentleman has just joined us in studio, had a couple of segments on the morning news with Larry and John. And the way the morning show works, I mean, they got so much stuff they have to do, they can't spend as much time on something as I can. But we were so intrigued, we invited him to join us for this hour in studio to talk about the odd, mysterious, and fascinating history of Pittsburgh. And I am opening the phone lines because he's perfectly happy to take questions from you. 866-391-1020. That's the number. Or you can email a question if you like. Instant access at KDKA.com. John Shalkowski. Did I get that right?
You got it right.
I got it close. That's a tough one. What is the background to that name?
That's Polish. Good old Pittsburgh Polish.
My name is Polish, or it's actually a derivative of Polish. Apparently, they changed the spelling when my father's parents came over on the boat, so to speak.
Yeah.
They left out a couple of letters, so I think he said it was supposed to be Pintek or something like that.
Most likely, it's the way it was pronounced. Yeah. It's not necessarily how it was spelled. That's the origin of last name.
So they shortened it to Pintek. It could have been worse, I suppose.
Oh, mine was a lot worse. Trust me.
So, John, your Facebook page, I took a look at it. It's Facebook. It's Odd Pittsburgh on Facebook. You can check this out. And you're writing a book about the odd history of Pittsburgh.
Yeah, we're starting a collaboration. I have an idea. It's more of an idea right now, and it's collaboration between about 50 different Pittsburgh local artists, where we're going to do a new graphic novel of the history of Pittsburgh like it's never been told before.
Well, okay, so let's start there. You showed me, now this is a book, I guess you would call this, or a little graphic, what is this? How would you describe it?
A collection of cartoons from the Pittsburgh Press.
Okay, a cartoonist looks at Pittsburgh. Of course, the Pittsburgh Press is gone. The Chamber of Commerce of Pittsburgh is the sponsor of this thing. And I'm thumbing through this, and this is Pittsburgh. Every page is "This is Pittsburgh," and it has little things about Pittsburgh. And I start the very first page. I looked at this and I laughed out loud. Pittsburgh has an exceptionally temperate climate. Oh, really?
Exactly.
Yeah, so you were talking about how you said it was May 31st. They had a big...
May 31st, 1893, it snowed in Pittsburgh.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't expect anything less.
And then there were people, well, it was so hot for just a few days ago, and they were saying that, oh my God, I can't remember it being this hot this early, but I'm sure it was.
Yeah, never say never.
All right. And then there's you gave me a copy of the General History of Spiritual Communication, Spirit Wrappings. What's this about?
Well, there was a large way of thought in the 1850s called spirit wrappings. It was the early form of a Ouija board type of technology where you would ask a question and apparently a ghost would tap on the table.
What,
give you one
Morse
for yes,
code?
two for no.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
All right.
And it apparently grew such a large following that 1851 a man came to Pittsburgh to investigate this haunting that was occurring somewhere down the north side. And this little pamphlet that you're holding there is the story about him coming to this house. Now, I mean, you can take it with a grain of salt because it's such an old account, but he claims that this was a seriously haunted house. I mean, they had things thrown from the walls. A knife was thrown across the room. There's only 4 people sitting at a table.
The subtitle on this it's called the Pittsburgh and Allegheny Spirit Wrappings, together with a general history of spiritual communications throughout the United States. That's quite a title. They went in for really big titles back in those days.
Exactly.
This is by Dr. J.B. Campbell, and the subtitle is, "It is a beautiful belief that ever round our head are hovering on noiseless wing the spirits of the dead."
Exactly. Now the movement really caught on after the Civil War. That's the origin of all paranormal movements in America, is because of such a great loss of life that occurred there. People sought these people out, the mediums, and to try to contact their lost husbands and different family members.
All right,
it's interesting history.
Yeah, when you said the Civil War, I was thinking about Gettysburg. I've heard so many tales about hauntings on the battlefield, and seeing things on the battlefield, and seeing fully dressed soldiers on the battlefield. I don't know. I don't necessarily disbelieve that stuff. I don't necessarily believe it.
Right.
I think it's entirely possible. But okay, so I was tipped off that there are a couple things that we can talk about.
Sure.
And then I'm going to rely on you to bring us some more of the odd and mysterious and fascinating history. But let's start with this. It was called the House of Horrors in Pittsburgh. Something about a serial killer operation?
Yeah, it's a great story.
Well, tell about that one.
It's almost, it's definitely book-worthy. There was a man named Dr. Charles C. Meredith, and he operated a home out of Belleview. right off of Lincoln Avenue. And he claimed that mysteriously women were coming to his house and just mysteriously vanishing or never coming out of his house. This went on for years.
He claimed the women mysteriously showed up at his house.
Would show up at his house. They would come.
Okay.
He said that they would leave and everything would be fine, but then the family would always report them missing or they would never return home, and he would just claim that they ran away. Now, the interesting thing is that this was an early form of a maternity ward, a maternity clinic, so it was more likely abortion clinic that was happening here in Bellevue.
Oh, so that had to be like code.
Yeah, exactly.
Because abortion was not legal at that time,
no.
of course.
No, of course it wasn't.
But in the back alleys, as they call it.
I mean, he was a real professional doctor, had a lot of training. He just happened to find a niche doing these types of surgeries.
Mm-hmm.
And apparently a lot of them went wrong. And now there's so much in depth in this story, including the nurse that lived with him in this house. Now, this nurse named Lucy Orr, she would apparently welcome the women in, set them up in a room in the house, and then as they were sleeping or as they're getting Operation steal everything they had and brought with them, including all their shoes, their clothes, jewelry.
Oh, my God.
Once they finally caught word of it, because how they got caught was a perfume heiress out in New York City named Dorothy Arnold. She went missing, and her family said that the last place she was known to go was Bellevue, Pennsylvania, and to this home. Now, her parents vehemently denied the fact that she might be pregnant out of wedlock and any kind of reason.
Well, that would
for
be
her to
very
be there.
embarrassing back in
Exactly.
What year was this again?
1914.
1914. Okay, so that would have been a major embarrassment, I would say.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And so she apparently went in and never came back out. And once the word got around Pittsburgh that the people last saw her go to this house, they did a search warrant and busted down the doors of the Bellevue mansion that this was all happening in. And their real tip-off was they had 3 furnaces in the basement. One for, I guess, they heat the house, the other one for the victims. The nurse was caught with hundreds of pairs of shoes. She had different wigs made of human hair. She had hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of jewelry.
But this also sounds like something that could have been, in the Nazi era, too. This is the kind of stuff they were doing.
Oh, of course.
Except they were doing it for different reasons.
Yeah, no one knows. I actually think it's more the nurse, more so than the doctor, that was really behind this whole thing.
All right, hold that thought. We'll continue here. The odd, mysterious, and fascinating history of Pittsburgh. Hey, if you've got a question for John Shalkowski, he's the man behind this, 866-391-1020, or email me a question for him, instant access at KDKA.com.
Radio.com. Radio.com.
2:20 now on KDKA, the odd, mysterious, and fascinating history of Pittsburgh. John Shalkowski is with us, and you're collaborating on a book. It's kind of a graphic novel, you're saying. You should write a bigger book, though, about these things.
Yeah, well, I'm an odd guy, so I'm trying to think of an unusual way to tell the history of Pittsburgh that's like it's never been told before.
Well, let's go back let's finish the story about that little house of horrors there in Bellevue.
Yeah.
All right.
So this nurse who was in charge of the operations, along with Dr. C.C. Meredith, they when they busted down the doors and did a search warrant, they found all these strange wigs made out of human hair, like a whole red wig, blonde, brown, that she would wear when she would greet some of these people. She was a little off.
And the basis of this, if you're just joining us, the basis of this goes back to 1914.
Yeah.
In Bellevue, and presumably this doctor was running an abortion operation, because at that time it was totally illegal, and these women would show up and then they'd disappear. And finally these people got caught. That's where we are in the story.
Well, here's the thing: were never able to have proof that the people were actually murdered there. They know that people were murdered there. They knew that they had a deal with a cemetery on Cemetery Lane in North Hills to bury some of these folks, which they exhumed some of them and found out that they were indeed in this hospital and buried under false names, which I have the death certificates for, because I've been researching this like you wouldn't believe. And the nurse was mainly because she was being a female, was able to get off scot-free. She disappeared. She went under 3 different pseudonyms: Lucy Orr, Lucy Doms, and I can't remember what the third last name was, but she disappeared. After 1950, I can't find a single record with her name on it. The doctor ended up getting arrested and went to jail for 6 months, and then moved to Chicago and just did family practice medicine until he died at the age of 88.
Wait a minute. He did 6 months. How many women did they ultimately determine were murdered?
The county sheriff said there was at least 120.
Okay, now
which would make him one of the highest profile serial killers of all time.
Okay, were these accidental deaths during the abortion surgery, or were these people literally murdered?
What you would assume would be the first couple might have been accidental, and they saw that there was profit to be made from some, especially from someone like a perfume heiress. It was worth millions of dollars in 1914 coming there with jewelry, fur coats, and the like. That they realized there was money to be made here, and no one's going to ask any questions because it was a secret operation.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's very interesting.
Yeah, nobody wanted to know anything about it. Wow. So how many bodies? 120?
Over 120.
Wow. You know what that reminds me of? That guy in Philadelphia, the Gosnell case.
Yeah.
Very similar. Because when that broke, I said, oh, my God, the guy's a serial killer.
Yeah, or like H.H. Holmes in the Chicago's World Fair. That's the most one of the most famous serial killers who had the same type of idea. He had a house of horrors.
During the break, I was starting to say to you, I read that there was I forget who wrote this book, but it was about it was the two concurrent tracks on this book. It was about the World's Fair in Chicago, and the serial killer was operating there. Wow.
Yeah, I mean, it's front page news, and I don't understand how nobody knows the story today.
I've never heard the story before.
And that's one of the reasons why I started my page.
Does that building still exist by any chance?
It does not.
Okay.
We did
because that would have to be haunted, right?
Yeah, absolutely. The foundation's still there, but that's it.
All right, so I was told about, we were talking, let's just take a minute here before we need to take a break. We were talking about the wealth in Pittsburgh back in those olden days, and Andrew Carnegie, and I said, how wealthy was Andrew Carnegie as compared to the wealth today?
He's equal up there with Bill Gates and the Koch brothers. I mean, he's that wealthy. He was a multi-billionaire when he died. And while he might have been accused of many shady business practices, a lot of people don't have a very good limelight of him, but he gave away every single penny he owned before he died. Every single penny. Everything.
To these foundations and to
and
we see those
museums
things today.
And libraries all over the world.
And the one thing you wanted to share was that where he's buried.
Yeah, you think someone like a Carnegie would be buried in a high-profile place like Pittsburgh or New York City even.
Sure.
But he ended up being buried in Sleepy Hollow Cemetery in Tarrytown, New York.
Okay, now is that where the Headless Horseman is?
That is. It's the same exact cemetery.
Why Sleepy Hollow?
Nobody knows.
Nobody knows. But you're going to research and see if you can find out one of these days. All right, more of the odd, mysterious, and fascinating history of Pittsburgh. There's a story about Amelia Earhart that's connected to Pittsburgh. There's a story about swastikas that showed up here. Before the Nazis started using them, and Houdini. Okay, so I want to get to those stories when we continue. John Shalkowski, founder of the Odd, Mysterious, and Fascinating History of Pittsburgh. Check him out on Facebook, Odd Pittsburgh.
Radio.com. Radio.com.
A minute away from the news. John Shalkowski is our guest, founder of the Odd, Mysterious, and Fascinating History of Pittsburgh. And just, I have 30 seconds here, but you said to me something during the break about how everything is connected to Pittsburgh somehow.
Everything.
But so much in history that we would never associate with Pittsburgh is in fact connected in one way, shape, or form.
Yeah, you name some kind of historical event, there's some kind of Pittsburgh connection.
Here in the United States.
They always hear the term 6 degrees of separation. There's a 1 degree separation here when it comes to Pittsburgh. You got the Titanic, the Hindenburg, all these different events throughout history all have some kind of Pittsburgh tie to them.
All right, we're going to try and get to as many of those as we possibly can in the next break. In the next half hour. John Shalkowski will continue. Rose checks the news right now. Yeah, one more. No, not one more. 2 more segments. And you know what? I'm already deciding that I'm going to have you back if you'll come back.
No, thanks.
At some future date, we'll continue talking about this. We're talking about the odd, mysterious, and fascinating history of Pittsburgh. John Shalkowski. And his check this out on Facebook, Odd Pittsburgh. It's on Facebook, so you can see some of this stuff. All right, let's start with this, because I love a good lesbian story. So Amelia Earhart, who disappeared on her, what was she doing, flying around the world or something like that?
Right, yeah.
And she disappeared, who knows where she went. They keep thinking they've found something, and maybe they have, who knows. But there's the other part of the story that nobody knew until now.
Yeah, and it involves a Pittsburgh connection, a woman named Helen Ritchie, a McKeesport native.
Okay.
And she was an early pioneer herself. She was the first woman in Allegheny County to have a pilot's license. She was the first woman teacher of aviation in the United States. All out of McKeesport, and people have no idea what her name is. And her connection to Amelia Earhart was the obvious, being that she happened to be a female aviator, and Amelia Earhart was the most famous. They would meet on a regular basis and just became really good friends.
Really, really good friends.
Really good friends.
Okay, but I mean, are you saying that it was a lesbian relationship?
It's well known, actually. And
I never knew that.
I know. I didn't know this either until I started researching it.
Okay.
And what turns out is this Helen and Amelia would exchange letters, love letters. And there's copies of them that still exist if you know where to look.
Okay.
And they're really interesting to read. I mean, they're very try to keep it all secret because there's such a high public profile. But then when the disappearance of Amelia Earhart occurred, that's when everything kind of broke loose for this Helen Ritchie, which caused her to go into a major depression.
So, but what happened to her ultimately?
Now, he found her dead in a New York City apartment.
Dead?
She was 33 years old. Now, no one knows. Now, people claim that it must have been a suicide, but there was no suicide note left. There was no medicine bottles laying around or anything like that. This was in the early 1940s when she'd passed away.
What was the circumstances of her death?
Well, when they started cleaning out her apartment, they found these strange correspondences. She was following up on her own a private investigation of Amelia Earhart's disappearance.
Oh, she was trying to find her on her own.
Yeah, okay. She did not believe that she was gone, and she believed that some people say that the same people who made Amelia Earhart disappear made Helen Ritchie disappear as well.
Well, why would anybody want Amelia Earhart to
that
disappear?
Is unknown. That's
are you putting credence into that theory?
No, there's many newspaper articles, and the letters themselves speak for it. The Western Union telegrams that would go back and forth between the two were very strange. They said they uncovered some kind of thing. They didn't say what. It was all code. It's basically that they discovered some kind of thing that they only talked about between each other. That was really their tied connection, and because Amelia Earhart was married, I mean she was, this kind of, it was a very big secretive thing that was going on here, and the fact that there was some kind of tie together, they were working on some kind of project or some kind of mission that was not really supposed to be known. Some people link to the deaths of both these characters.
Oh, okay. So when you say that they were working on something, you're not referring to some sort of lesbian love affair.
No. That was just occurring.
This is something else. Yeah. Above and beyond, but nobody knows what that is.
Nobody knows. There's a local.
How did this? What was the actual cause of this Ritchie woman's death?
They just said suicide.
But I mean,
just stopped breathing. That's all the death certificate says.
That was it. No other signs of foul play.
The death certificate says natural causes. 33 years old.
And you don't believe that?
Well, at face value, it looks okay, but when you start digging into the story, you start noticing these strange occurrences, including this great book written by a local woman named Andrea, who really delved into that story.
The swastika. You showed me a penny with a swastika on it.
Right.
What's the?
Well, this is it's a souvenir from the Duquesne Gardens, which was the home of the early Pittsburgh hockey teams and the Ice Capades originally. And it's a flattened out penny like you'd get at a souvenir, like a Kennywood or the Duquesne
Incline,
or whatever.
Right, you put the penny in, they engrave something on it, flatten it.
Right, except this one says Duquesne Gardens, 1910, and right in the middle is a big swastika.
Well, what's the deal on that? That was obviously
1910,
predated the Nazis in Germany.
Yeah, it was a sign of good luck, and it remains that in cultures like Buddhism and Hinduism and other places around the world to this day. But the Nazis gave it a bad rap, obviously, and
what I noticed was that the orientation of the swastika on that penny is what I would call vertical,
right?
And the one the Nazis generally used in the flags and in their insignias is kind of tilted a little bit.
Correct.
That was a difference. But I did look this up on Google the other day, and I think it was maybe Wikipedia or something. But this dates back thousands of years. This symbol alone dates back thousands of years. Believe it or not,
they believe it's one of the first symbols that they found that has continued to this day. It's one of the oldest symbols that you could point out on a building. It appears thousands of years ago.
Are there swastikas on buildings today? I understand there are. I mean, right here in Pittsburgh.
Right here in Pittsburgh. If you know where to look, there's swastikas all over the place. In fact, most Pittsburgh mansions had it carved right into their wood inside their houses.
Well, what did it mean?
Good luck.
I mean, prior to the Nazis,
good luck.
It was good luck.
Yeah. A sign of good fortune, good luck. People had it carved right in their front lawns out of landscaping and bushes.
Okay.
People had it emblazoned on the side of their buildings. The one that I know of that's still standing is on McKnight Road, right next to Pizza Hut. There's a an old auto body shop that just has about 30 swastikas on the side.
I'm amazed that nobody's going out there to protest and complain.
I'm amazed no one even notices it.
Well, I'll bet they will now.
Yeah, they definitely will.
Okay, well, now because the Nazis turned this into something evil,
Right.
or at least a connection to evil and bad luck. And speaking of bad luck, people in the Titanic had bad luck, and you say there's a Pittsburgh connection with that. So when we continue, let's pick up there, and then I want to talk about Houdini and his connection to Pittsburgh. The great escape artist, Houdini. It's 2:43 right now on KDKA. With me is John Shalkowski. He is the founder of the Odd, Mysterious, and Fascinating History of Pittsburgh. He is currently collaborating on a graphic novel, or not a novel, a graphic book, about a history book about Pittsburgh, about this odd, mysterious, and fascinating history. Also, check him out on Facebook, Odd Pittsburgh on Facebook.
Radio.com. Radio.com.
That's green onions, isn't it? There's some history for you. Green onions. 2:49 on KDKA. Mike Pintek here with the founder of the Odd, Mysterious, and Fascinating History of Pittsburgh. He's got a lot of this stuff posted on Odd Pittsburgh on Facebook. John Shalkowski. All right, so let's start with the Titanic. What's the deal on the Titanic?
Well, the ship that picked up the survivors of the Titanic was the Carpathia. Now, on board the Carpathia was a very well-known, prominent Pittsburgh architect at the time, who was on his way back from his honeymoon with his wife. And they got the distress signal, obviously, and came to help rescue the survivors. Still thinking the ship was still existing. When they arrived to the actual area, they saw that was just a couple boats. And
because it sank rather
sank
quickly.
Pretty quick. Yeah, it took about 4 hours for them to reach the survivors and the ice and cold waters. And when they were on board, he was the only person with a camera.
Wow.
And documented the whole experience.
Well, I've seen those pictures. So those are all his pictures.
All of his Pittsburgh connection, yeah.
Huh.
And he gave up his room to a new widow on his honeymoon trip back. So it's a sad story.
But she was a survivor of the
Titanic, yeah.
Houdini. Tell that story.
Now, Houdini, being obviously the most famous magician of all time.
Escape artist.
And debunker of myths.
Yes.
In fact, he loved that document I gave you there about spiritual
the
wrappings.
spirit wrappings. Well, he was
right up his alley.
At various points in his life, he was on a mission he was actually looking to see if there was anybody who really could contact the other side, so to speak.
Including himself. He said when he would go, that he would try to come back and contact his wife.
There was like some kind of code or something that only his wife knew, and that she was to go to these mediums after he died, and she did, and hoping to find somebody who actually knew, actually really was in contact. But that's beside the story.
Right,
the story, Houdini performing in Pittsburgh.
Yeah, Houdini visited here over 20 times in Pittsburgh doing different types of acts, but his big claim to fame, why is a Pittsburgh connection to Houdini, is that in 1908, during the cold winter months, he signed up for a challenge to be handcuffed, thrown in a box, and dumped into the Monongahela River when it was all covered in ice. Now, from Houdini's own words, he said it was the closest to death he's ever been in his entire life. And
the reason was what?
They broke through the ice. He was able to start getting his handcuffs off, but then he noticed quickly, once he was trying to get out of the box, that he was stuck underneath that ice. And he disappeared. He was under the river for over 5 minutes.
So they cut a hole in the ice, and they put the box in there. He's inside the box, and he's handcuffed.
He started drifting down the river with the current. And
as anybody who has any sense will know, if you can't find a break in the ice, you're in big trouble.
Yeah, he said there was maybe an 2-inch gap that he was able to get his nose into to try to get a half breath of air to try to make it out. But he was in there over 5 minutes in freezing cold water in our river.
Did he not suspect that might happen? I mean, you would think that he would plan for something.
You think
like
he would? Yeah. He just said that it was the scariest moment of his life, and he said he'd never forget it. And till the day he died, he talked about his experience here in Pittsburgh and how he would almost died.
Did they fear that he was gone at that point? I would imagine they would.
Yeah, after
5 minutes.
3 minutes, or so, you'd think somebody would not be coming back. He was hung from buildings downtown. I mean, he escaped out of many different places. He did many different shows at different theaters all over town. The Stanley Theater being one of them that he would like to go to.
Why was Pittsburgh such a big deal in American history? What are some of the reasons for that?
Yeah, most people think Pittsburgh's all about ketchup and steel, and when I look at the history of Pittsburgh, I look at it from the gateway to the West. you could not travel west in the United States of America unless you entered Pittsburgh.
Yeah,
you had to go up the Three Rivers.
Now, what period of time are we talking about?
You're talking from the 1750s onward, up until the expansion of
and so
the West.
the so-called pioneers, they had this notion of manifest destiny, that we were destined to have this entire continent. We had to head west, go yet west, young man, and all of those roads led through Pittsburgh.
Yeah, I mean, this was France at one time, twice actually, and under control of France, and then obviously the King of England owned all of Pennsylvania at one time. And William Penn and William Pitt were all from, England and Scotland is where their origins come from. In fact, Pittsburgh, the origin of the name is Pittsboro, like Edinburgh, because that's where William Pitt was from.
And then of course, in the Industrial Revolution, we became industrialized, and that's where the steel comes from, and Heinz and all that stuff. And now we're even more diversified.
Oh yeah, it's taken off. It's the dream. It's the American dream. You could be accomplished right here in Pittsburgh. Always could be. Always still will.
I was telling John off air my little story about coming here. I came here from Washington, D.C., so at that time that was the fourth largest city in the country. I don't know what it is right. It may still be. I'm not really sure. Pittsburgh, I think it was starting to fall from its perch in the top 20. I think we were in the top 10 at one point, but that fell. Anyway, I decided I'm coming to KDKA in Pittsburgh, and my friends who are Washingtonians. These people, they're born and raised there. And they said, how in the world are you leaving Washington, D.C., and you're going to Pittsburgh? Mm-hmm. And I said, well, I have some trepidations here about coming from Washington going to Pittsburgh. However, I would say to you, look around you here in Washington, all these beautiful buildings, all this wealth that is centralized, and it's even more so today, here in Washington comes from places, especially places like Pittsburgh.
Well, to put it this simple, the Republican Party was founded in Pittsburgh.
So, is that right?
It was. Founded, yeah. Liberty Hall downtown. Okay. And so a lot of people don't, or the Whig Party, in fact, started here in Pittsburgh, too, if you go back even farther. So there's such a deep connection to American history right here in Pittsburgh that it's, if you fail to learn from the past, you're doomed to repeat it, so...
Well, I'll tell you what, it's been a pleasure to have you with us. Check out his Facebook page. Odd Pittsburgh is what it's called, right?
Yes.
That's it?
Yep.
And you were telling me during the break, too, that it's not just the old-time history that we've been talking about.
Oh, yeah. I have stories about the time Nirvana came here just a week before they released their first album in 1991 and gave a show to 30 people in Monroeville.
Yeah, and you said that you also have over 30,000 photographs.
Yeah.
Various
videos.
Various eras and videos on that Facebook page.
Ranging from 1904 to, I have the entire spring training of 1934 Pittsburgh Pirates on there and with sound.
Wow.
Honest Wagner in the flesh.
Well, John, you got to also share with us when you come out with this graphic book that you're working on of the history of Pittsburgh, the odd, mysterious, and fascinating history of Pittsburgh on Facebook, Odd Pittsburgh. John Shalkowski, thanks for being with us this afternoon.
Hey, thanks for having me, Mike.
Traffic on the 5s.